He's gonna bring me all the way from the back, all the way to the front. Yo, welcome back to the channel, boys and girls. In today's video, I'm gonna take you along my favorite weekly fast group ride in Chicago. I'm gonna show you what all the sprint segments are about, and I'm also gonna give you some tips on how to survive this fast group ride. Oh, and by the way, if you are new to my channel, my name is Patrick Glino, and I am a cyclist in Chicago who builds bikes, who does bike reviews. And if you really want to support the channel, then consider swiping right on my Tinder profile as soon as you see it. And don't tell my wife. Without further ado, let's begin. All right, so this is one of our weekly Wednesday evening training rides, and this is where a lot of the local Chicago race clubs and teams get together to train hard in preparation for races, for cyclocross, whatever you name, although this is the end of the season. And this group is, as you can see, I'm really excited. This group consists of everything from Cat 3s, from Cat 2s, Cat 1s, master racers, you name it. And so you think about it, having some of these Cat 1 guys race and train with us. These are the same guys that are racing with the likes of Legion, ButcherBox, Miami Blazers, Team Mike Bikes, and even for some of our master racers. In fact, we have a master racer in our club. He's competing with the likes of Sharon Smith, Rashawn Bahai, those type of big wig names. So it's just crazy that I'm able to train with this crazy amount of experience and skill set here. And so in this video, guys, I just want to take you along this weekly ride just to give you a better understanding of what it's like. I've had a lot of people in my comments requesting to ride with this group if you live in Chicago or if you're visiting in Chicago. And even though you can simply go to my Strava to get the details of this ride, I think presenting this video to you guys will give you a better understanding of what this fast training ride is like. And if you have a local fast group ride in your area, these tips in these videos are going to help you to survive and especially will keep you safe. Tip number 1. Research the group ride in its entirety. So this is going to include knowing the route, whether you research the route on Strava or ride with GPS, understanding what the average speed of the ride is, including the rolling speeds, and determining whether or not it is a drop or a no drop protocol. These are going to be extremely important later on in this video. So for this particular group ride on this day, the total distance was about 40 miles long. And even though we only averaged about 22 miles an hour, which is a little bit slower than what it has been in the summer, the rolling speeds were anywhere between 25 to 30 miles an hour. And then with the sprint segments and all of the lead out trains, the speeds can reach upwards of 38 miles an hour, which is pretty fast. That's basically the end of a crit race. So this is why it's going to be important, especially if you are new to these type of rides, is to research all of these things ahead of time so you can prepare and plan what you're going to be doing in these rides so that you can stay safe and you can ride fast. So this is actually one of the first spicy segments on the group ride. It's not quite a sprint. It's just a long 2-minute drag where we head west on the street called Beckwith. And this is where you can tell right away whether or not you're going to have the fitness to survive this whole entire 40-mile group ride. This is probably at like mile 5 or so. And the roads are so crappy here. There's a lot of congestion. There's a lot of activity happening, people jockeying for position. So this first segment is a really good gauge of what it's going to be like for the rest of the ride. And like I said in the intro here, this ride has a mix of just long drags as well as sprints here. And so this is why it's going to be important to know the details of the ride so that you don't get caught off surprise and end up spitting out the back of the ride only at mile 5. So this leads me into tip number 2. Learn all of the sprint segments and the lead out sections. You can easily find out what the sprint sections are going to be if you check the Strava profile of this ride here. So this ride has about 8 segments where it gets super duper spicy. Everything from 30 to 45-second sprints all the way to 2 to 4 minute drags, which is crazy. And it's going to be extremely important that you know when these sprint sections are going to come. I would not count on anyone to tell you when these spicy sections are going to happen. You just need to be in position so that you can stay with the group. And this is why, again, it's important to know what you're getting into. And you know, I don't want to discourage anyone from not joining these rides because I think these rides are great for training. And if you want to get faster, you're going to have to train with people that are faster than you, unless you want to sit on trainer road by yourself all off season, which you can do that, that's fine. But this is why it's so amazing to be in these group rides, because you get to train and you get to learn a lot. And if you do want to just sit in, you could do that. But when it gets spicy like this is when you start to really feel the pain, feel the burn. But these are the things that are going to make you stronger. Tip number 3, be realistic with your fitness. So these group rides are open to the public, and believe it or not, everyone is encouraged to join. This is going to be some of the best race simulation you're going to be able to get, whether you do live here in Chicago or even in your local town or city. You're going to get all the race simulation that you're going to need outside of an actual practice crit or a practice road race. And in these fast group rides, you can make it as easy or as difficult as you want. If you want to just sit in and do no watts or even tail gun off the back, you could probably do that, although it's going to be really difficult for you once we start surging out of the corners. Or you could make the same group ride as difficult as you want by simply sitting at the front, pulling the group along, starting up the lead out trains for your peeps, your friends, whoever you want. But you still have to be realistic with your fitness. There's no point of coming on to this group ride and then you're going all out effort, you're burning all of your matches, and you realize you're only at mile 10, and then you end up getting dropped or popped out the back of the group ride, because that's no fun. So this is where you have to come into this ride understanding what your fitness is. If you don't know what your FTP is, that's fine. It's not really that important, but you do need to understand what your threshold is so that you can stay with the group for the duration of the group ride. Now, this section you're seeing here, this is Lehigh section going north. This is one of the most difficult segments of the whole entire group ride, because it's about 5 or 6 minutes at threshold. It's just a super duper long drag, especially if you get all the lights like we did here. So there's no stopping. And you will notice a lot of people starting to get popped off the back. And this is where it's going to be important to find a good position, especially either mid-pack or towards the front, because there's going to be all of these micro surges happening where by the time it gets all the way to the back of the group, you're going to have to end up doing like 700 or 800 watts just to stay on, while the people mid-pack are doing probably about 300 or 400 watts. And I know this section is very difficult because the very first time I showed up to this ride last spring in 2021, I almost got dropped from the group, and I had opened up this huge gap and the people behind me were probably cussing me out. So yeah, this is a super hard section of the ride, but it's also one of the most fun. And this brings me to tip number 4. Don't be sketchy and close gaps. On these fast group rides, it is expected that everyone is going to follow all of the guidelines of the ride leader and all of the other experienced riders on these rides. And the last thing you want to be flagged at, especially if you are new to these groups, is being flagged as someone is sketchy. And there's so many different ways someone could view you as being sketchy. It could be whether you show up to a ride where your bike is not mechanically sound, you're not stopping at the red lights, you're opening up gaps when the surging happens and the pace gets faster. These are all things that you have to be cognizant of when you show up to these group rides. And so even though these rides are open to the public and people are encouraged to join, I wouldn't necessarily say that these rides are for someone that has just got into cycling, or if you are brand new to riding in various pace lines. So if that is you, then maybe spend a couple of months or even a couple of weeks riding in smaller groups, just so you get a feel for how to ride in groups. Another way that people will flag you as sketchy is if you are taking or eating so much breaks every time you slow down or when you go into a corner. People will definitely hate you for that. And especially for some of these other groups who are racing, who are training to compete, they don't really want to be riding around someone that they deem as unsafe. So don't be sketchy. Make sure you close the gaps if they do open, and make sure you work together in harmony with the group. So the section you're seeing is what we call the Walters up section, or the beginning of it. It starts at the red light, and then you begin going up this minor uphill pinch, and then it's followed by a series of several 90-degree turns. And this section is also really difficult. It's about 4 or 5 minutes long, but because of all of the 90-degree turns, that means that there are all these surges that happen and all these gaps opened up. So a lot of the folks at the front, especially those who are exceptionally strong, this is usually the perfect place for them to form a breakaway, because if you can break away in this section and it being so long, you can probably go the distance through all the way towards the end of the ride if you are really strategic and working together. And so because of that, this is where all the splits happen, and this is where the group basically blows up. And this is one of the other areas for me where when I first started coming to these rides, this is where I would almost get popped out the back. So again, this is where it's going to be really important to find a good pocket to be in, usually, like I said, mid-pack or towards the front, because being at the back on this section is going to probably be, in my opinion, the most difficult part of the whole entire group ride. Now, the section you're seeing on your screen, this is what we like to call the CarMax Sprint. This is probably the second most popular or second most infamous sprint section, lead out train, drag, whatever you want to call it, in Chicago. Now, at this point in the ride, we have basically a cross tailwind hitting us, but because it's such a long drag, this is where people really hit it. I want to say at this point, we probably reached about 35 miles an hour or so, and it's such a long drag, but man, it is just so fun. It's just basically straight up chaos. And I believe the end of the sprint segment ends at the CarMax sign. So basically this whole entire stretch, some of the clubs and teams, they're going to be forming their lead out train so that they can get their sprinter in the best position to win the CarMax sprint. If you win this sprint, this is definitely one of the bragging rights you can have for the evening. Someone will probably end up buying you a beer. But man, like, this was just such an amazing night, man. My legs were feeling good. I ate well. The weather was nice and cool, so my heart rate was good. And man, like, this is just one of those seconds where I'm just like, yo, I am super excited and thrilled that I'm able to cycle with some of the great cyclists in our area, and then I'm just holding on for dear life. Now, at this point in the ride, my legs were feeling good, and so I was like, you know what, maybe I'm going to try to contest the sprint, or at least be towards the front. Now, at this point, I had heard that one of my local clubs, or frenemy clubs, you want to call it, I knew that they were going to be leading out their guys for a sprint for this particular segment here. So my plan was I was going to hop on their wheel. I was going to be third or fourth wheel and just hit it right when their sprinter goes off. So I was in the perfect position. And at this point, because we're going so fast, there's really no point sucking wind. So I was tucked in, I was buckled up, ready to go. But what ended up happening was there was this gentleman in front of me. I don't know if he was leading out one of his guys earlier or he just simply popped. I think he just popped, but he ended up slowing down right as I was ramping up. So I had to touch brakes. And unfortunately, in that moment, I went from like 8th wheel, I was all the way down to about 20th wheel. So I was pretty bummed, but that's just how it goes. At the end of the day, it's not really a race, but you know, you just want to compete and work as hard as you can.
Dude, I had the perfect lead out behind Skokie. Then that guy slowed down right in the wrong lane. I lost like 15 wheels.
The next section on your screen is what we call the Skokie lagoons. So as you see, we made that left-hand turn, and again, back to surging. And just look at the effort it required me to surge just to get back on this guy's wheel. And so yeah, this is another section where people like to make these attacks, and it's just another long drag. It's probably about 3 or 4 minutes long. You're basically seeing a trend here of what it's like to be on this particular group ride. There are some sprints, but there are a lot of times when it's just long drag. And this is another place where you definitely want to tuck in and stay safe. What will happen is about halfway through this section, the field will start to lull, they'll start to settle down, and then boom, you'll see an attack go. And so this is where you're going to have to decide, do you want to follow those attacks and follow someone's lead out, or do you want to just sit in and basically recover, because at this point we're probably about halfway through the ride, and you have to determine, do you have enough energy, do you have enough juice to make it the distance. But really at this point, after this long stretch, I'm not saying the ride is a little bit easier, but there's not going to be as many crazy surges because there just aren't that many 90-degree turns or red lights for people to attack right out of the gate. The section you see on your screen is what we like to refer to as the rollers. Now in this section, this is a great place for people to make attacks on these undulating hills, because if you do make a strong attack, you might be able to have it stick all the way to the end of the ride. The problem is that in this late of the season, it gets pretty dark by the time we get to this section. So safety is the #1 priority. And this leads me to tip number 5. Stay within the yellow lines. This might seem obvious, but it is so important to do this, especially in this section here where you have these blind hills, blind curves, and oncoming traffic. They're just not going to be able to see you. Now, if this was a road race, if you went over the yellow line, the officiators or the stewards, they would come by you and they would immediately disqualify you from the race. Now, you've already seen that. I've already done that a couple times in this video, unfortunately, because I got squeezed. But if you are a new rider and you don't know what you're doing, make sure that you always follow this guideline. If anything else on this ride, I would say that's probably one of the main things you should definitely follow.
I'm sorry for what I said earlier. Hurt people, you know?
Yeah.
I apologize.
Yeah, that really hurt my feelings. I haven't been riding now.
I actually think you are beautiful.
Oh, really?
Yeah, man.
Is it my bike or is it me?
90% you, 10% bike.
Oh, okay.
Up, 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 up. But I think people just didn't know. So, because we haven't really been, like, looking at it. Yeah. Sneaky little bugger. Yeah. I'm starting to be ready for the chase. That's a long chase though.
Alrighty guys, so we are almost finished here. This is one of the last long drags on this ride here. This is Green Bay Road and we're heading south. Now we're back having a tailwind. Now at this point in the ride, there is a two-man breakaway up the road. I have no idea how these two guys got off the front and no one saw them go and didn't catch it in time, but they're probably about 30 seconds up the road. Now, it's going to be difficult for them to stay away. So the plan for us as a group collectively was to work together to reel them back in. This is a long stretch. This is probably a solid 5 minutes at threshold, and then it ends with a sprint segment. And this leads me to my final tip, guys, tip number 6, which is basically just remember to have fun on these rides. Even though they are competitive and they do get difficult and spicy at times, at the end of the day, they're not a race, they're not a sanctioned anything. They're just a training ride where everyone is having fun. There's a lot of camaraderie. After this ride, everybody gets together at the local 7-Eleven and we have beers, pizzas, just hang out, talk about our family, our kids, whatever the case may be. And that's just one thing I want you guys to remember if you are new to doing these sort of rides. Just remember to have fun. It's going to be okay. And if you do get dropped, who cares? Just work harder, train, come back next week or whenever the next fast group ride is scheduled in your area, and just try to hang on a little bit longer. That's basically what I did when I first started going to these rides, and I absolutely love it. And this is why I look forward to these rides every single week. All right, guys, so we're coming down Green Bay Road south here. And as you can see, my clubmate tells me to get on his wheel because he's going to lead me out. He's going to bring me all the way from the back, all the way to the front, just to set me up for this sprint segment here as we go through the yellow light. So, bro, I am holding on for dear life, man. Look at my watts, man. This guy is super strong on my team, my club here, man. So look at that, man. I'm barely holding on to his wheel. I'm doing some serious watts here. So look at this. We go all the way from about 30 or 40th wheel or so, and look at this. My man brought me all the way to the front. And this is actually one of the harder segments and sprints that we have in our area. I think I actually PR'd on this segment, but just crazy strength. And I was so flattered that he signaled for me to hop on his wheel, because honestly, if I didn't have the fitness, if he didn't believe in me, he wouldn't even bother wasting or burning a match just to help me out. And so I'm happy that I'm just at a point in my fitness and my sort of camaraderie with my club that I can even do anything like this. So this is the final sprint segment of the evening. This is probably the most notorious and the most sketchy sprint segment in all of Chicago here. This is the Bahai sprint. And at this point, my legs are basically cooked all evening. My legs were feeling good, but yeah, I was tired from all of the sprints, closing of the gaps, the surges, etc. So I wasn't trying to go for any crazy sprint. I think at this point I was like mid-pack. So I'm just trying to sit in, make sure I can stay safe because it's super duper dark. And yeah, in the end, I was able to get by unscathed, and I'm super happy of how this ride ended. So that's going to do it with this video today, guys. I hope you guys enjoyed it. And as always, if you have any questions, comments, or concerns, please feel free to leave them down below. And I will check you guys on the next one. Thank you so much for watching. Peace.